Commit all counsel, wisdom, and understanding. We thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that, we having thy fear always in our eyes, and laying aside all private interest, prejudices, and partial affections, the results of all our counsel may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of all the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
The Honourable House now resumed its sittings. Call of the roll.
Mr. Witter, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Olness, Dr. Clark, Mr. Shaw, Dr. Chang, Mr. Montague, Ms. Grange, Mr. Henry, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Mackenzie, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Darrell Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mrs. Robinson, Mr. Hutchinson, Dr. Wheatley, Dr. Tufton, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Mr. Spencer, Mr. Green, Mr. Terrelong, Mr. Main, Mr. Arscott, Mr. Azan, Dr. Bloomfield, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Mr. Buchanan, Mr. Bunting, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Clark, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Miss Daly, Mr. Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Fagan, Dr. Ferguson, Mr. Golding, Dr. Guy, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Hales, Mrs. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kelly, Dr. McNeil, Miss Nita, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Pickersgill, Mr. Redmond, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Stewart, Reverend Thwaites, Mr. Dwayne Vaz, Mr. Wright.
Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today is the report of the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development for the year 2017-2018.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motion given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sittings of the House, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I now move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Trust Act 2018.
A bill entitled the Trust Act 2018 read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Public business.
Mr. Speaker, today we will have two presentations, starting with the Minister of Local Government. Unfortunately, the member from Westmoreland Western is not able to make his presentation today, so it will be put off for another day. After the Minister of Local Government, we'll hear from the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security. So I now invite you to ask the Minister of Local Government to make his presentation.
Honorable Desmond McKenzie. Minister, before you proceed, I understand you require me to welcome a certain amount of friends and delegates and officials. I want at this time for the House to recognize them and to welcome them. Behind me, beside me is the mayor of Kingston, and if we don't recognize him, we may not be able to get a passport to come back. So let's recognize the mayor of Kingston. Minister Desmond McKenzie.
Mr. Speaker, I seek your permission to speak from a seat other than mine, Mr. Speaker.
You may go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to, first of all, give thanks to the Almighty for His guidance, His tender care over the many years of my life. This year, Mr. Speaker, I will celebrate my 66th birthday, Mr. Speaker. And also, Mr. Speaker, this year, 41 years of my involvement in local government and representative politics, both at the local and national level, Mr. Speaker. All these achievements, Mr. Speaker, is made possible by the love and affection of my soulmate, friend and provider. For over 40 years, Mr. Speaker, and I want to express my gratitude, my love, and appreciation to Marcia and to my sons and daughters, the extended family, Mr. Speaker. I want to also acknowledge my constituents, the great constituency of Western Kingston. Easily, Mr. Speaker, the most dedicated and committed constituency in the English-speaking Caribbean. Their loyalty, Mr. Speaker, can never, ever be questioned. It is of interest to note, Mr. Speaker, that since 1949, or since 1944, only once the constituency of West Kingston has ever gone away from the Jamaica Labour Party. They made one mistake. That's one mistake. Mr. Speaker, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the people of West Kingston has been my rock. Yes. They have been a force of strength and support. Yes. And I want to acknowledge and to thank them for the confidence that they continue to display in me since 1977, when I was elected as councillor for the Denham Town Division. I want to thank the Most Honorable Prime Minister for the confidence he continued to place in me. The confidence that is so clear as we continue the transformation of local government, not Kenneth. Wallace. Yes, beat you, Sheriff, the only time. We made a mistake. We'll make that mistake again. Just about. Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge quickly in the audience the ambassador of Japan, His Excellency, the ambassador, and the Charter of Affairs of the United States Embassy, Mr. Speaker, who I've invited here because of a relationship, and the ambassador of Cuba. Mr. Speaker, it is important because there is a relationship surrounding local government that these three countries have been working closely with this administration, and especially the Japanese, who we have benefited significantly over the last couple of years. And I want to extend a special welcome to them and all the other entities that are present here this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is the most progressive administration that this country has seen as it relates to local government.
Yeah, yeah.
As someone who has been involved in local government over the years, this administration has brought new life to local government. And as I said earlier on, Mr. Speaker, 41 years of involvement. I am humbled and proud to be the one under this administration that is shaping the present and the future of local government through this time of fundamental change. The process of transforming this level of government for national prosperity fundamentally involves the investment of significant money, time in social and physical infrastructure of local government. Our burning desire for a better life for everyone is inspired by the call of a national pledge, and I will quote a few lines from the pledge: to work diligently and creatively, to think generously and honestly, so that Jamaica may, under God, increase in beauty, fellowship, and prosperity. After 2 years, 2 months, 9 days in office, 800 days, to be precise, Mr. Speaker, this administration is demonstrating in real terms and in real sense its commitment to our people through sustainable, continuing capital investment in infrastructure and services of local government. The result of program of continuous orientations with elected representatives, administrative officials, we are seeing significant improvement in the levels of accountability and governance in the local authorities. The improvement in standards observed are also being seen, Mr. Speaker, in the level of management that the local authorities have brought to the development approval process. In the last financial year, 2017-18, the local authorities and partner agencies processed some 4,527 applications, value at $65.4 billion, and approved, Mr. Speaker, some 3,493 of those applications were approved, processed and approved in 90 days, Mr. Speaker, 90 days. So 89% of the submissions met the 90 days approval process. This is the highest rate of application of approval, and this is a benchmark, Mr. Speaker, because it is the first time since 2013-14 that the rate of approval has exceeded 80% in the 90 days window, Mr. Speaker. And I want to commend the local authorities for a job well done, Mr. Speaker. We started the unprecedented, Mr. Speaker, the process of allocating dedicated funding to the elected representatives through a four-pronged approach. $400 million of municipal social assistance was provided to strongly enhance the effectiveness of the councillors in assisting those who are considered to be vulnerable in their divisions. The fund, Mr. Speaker, was a part of $700 million that the ministry provided to enhance social protection through administrative support to councillors, social housing assistance, indigent housing assistance, education, and funeral grants. The councillors, Mr. Speaker, and members of this Honourable House have expressed their appreciation for the program, and I want to advise the 230 elected local government practitioners across the country that it is the intention of this administration to continue the program in this new financial year. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, some $386.7 million will be spent in this financial year. $68 million will be allocated for administrative support, office assistance. $114 million will be devoted to education and funeral grants. $90 million will be spent on indigent housing, while $114 million will be dedicated to social housing. One of my strong desires, Mr. Speaker, is to see our indigent citizens outside of the care of our infirmary, living in houses that reflects the dignity and pride of these people, Mr. Speaker. It is an improvement over the traditional wooden indigent houses that was started many years ago, Mr. Speaker. We made a commitment, and I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, that in partnership with the Clarendon Municipal Corporation, we designed and built two modern concrete structure housing solutions, one at Palmer's Cross and the other in Craftsdale. These structures, Mr. Speaker, feature, amongst other things, self-contained kitchen, bathroom, and proper ventilation for the occupants. I was honored, Mr. Speaker, to hand over the keys of these units to Miss Patsy Wheatley at Palmer's Cross and to Mr. and Mistress Earl Ferron at Craftsdale, And they are here with us today in this honorable chamber, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to recognize them, Mr. Speaker. They were the first persons to benefit from this program, Mr. Speaker. And Craftsville is in the member from North Clarendon constituency. I'm also pleased to announce that 28 more units will be built, 2 per parish. And the other 2 units, Mr. Speaker, will be built in St. Andrew, in 2 divisions in the hills of St. Andrew, Mr. Speaker. We are proposing to spend some $52 million on this program. We are also continuing to improve the infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, of our infirmaries island-wide. Presently, our infirmaries is the home of over 1,500 Jamaicans who find it necessary to reside in these facilities. This year, Mr. Speaker, we will commence construction on new wards at the Portland, Manchester, and St. James Infirmary at a cost of $128 million, Mr. Speaker. The St. Elizabeth Infirmary will receive, finally, the new administrative building at a cost of $16 million, Mr. Speaker. Westmoreland Infirmary. Many years, the infirmary operates without a matron quarters, Mr. Speaker. This year, we will build the new matron quarters at the Westmoreland Infirmary at a cost of $20 million Jamaican dollars, Mr. Speaker. These and other works will be done, Mr. Speaker. These and other works will be done at a cost of $200 million. And I want to state, Mr. Speaker, that this is a joint partnership between the Ministry of Local Government and the National Housing Trust. In this regard, I wish to publicly applaud the vision, the energy of the NHT board, and in particular, the recent chairman and now Minister of Finance of the Public Service. This agreement, Mr. Speaker, was made possible because, let me say, that the Most Honorable Portia Simpson Miller in 2012 did make some announcement in regards to the NHT. But as I said last year, Mr. Speaker, we are the finisher. Amen. We know to get the job done. Yeah. And it was the responsibility of this administration to take it and make it possible. I'm also pleased, Mr. Speaker, to announce that the ministry approached the Chase Fund to help us to improve the conditions of the infirmary. And the Chase Fund has agreed and will now come on board to partner, Mr. Speaker, to provide an additional amount to ensure that all the infirmaries in the country have standby generator and solar water heating system, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another approach of partnership is the partnership with the Ministry of Health in constructing 10 double units at the St. Anne, St. James, Manchester, and St. Catherine Infirmary to address the needs of social cases in our hospitals, Mr. Speaker. Through the Human Services Bill, which is now before the House, the infirmaries will be rebranded as the adult residential care facilities. It will undergo significant operational changes. Since tabling of the bill, we have been engaging in consultation with various sectors, including the trade unions and other stakeholders, about the proposed changes. And at an appropriate time, Mr. Speaker, I intend to pilot this important piece of legislation through this honorable House. But, Mr. Speaker, let me say, I have said it already and I'm going to say it again. This administration is not going to sweep under the carpet the abuse that some of the residents in our infirmary is experiencing from people who work in the infirmary, Mr. Speaker. I am not going to, Mr. Speaker, sweep under the carpet the various abuse, Mr. Speaker, that they are being subjected to. Whether it is one, Mr. Speaker, it is one too many, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, we are going to do everything. We're not just going to change the name, Mr. Speaker. We're going to change everything that goes with the infirmary, because the people who live there deserve better. Some of them contribute significantly to the growth and development of this country. It is the responsibility of this administration to make it right, and we intend to do so, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are erecting drop-in centers right across the country. 6 drop-in centers, Mr. Speaker, is in the process of being completed. Last Friday, I had the privilege, Mr. Speaker, of officially opening the first drop-in center of its kind in the country, in the parish of St. Anne in Portugal. Mr. Speaker, these drop-in centers will be built at a cost of some $28 million. These centers will provide comprehensive care. It is estimated that there is close to 2,000 persons living on the streets of this country, Mr. Speaker. And the drop-in centers will provide progressive service, Mr. Speaker, addressing the needs of these persons. Mr. Speaker, I want to use this opportunity to pay special tribute and to thank Mr. Barrington Parson, the corporate secretary of the Board of Supervision, who is now on retirement, for after over 30 years of dedicated service to the poor in this country, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to use the floor of this honorable House to express to Mr. Parson the appreciation and thanks of the government and people of Jamaica for the work that he has done. And, Mr. Speaker, I am going to make recommendations that the country acknowledge and honor Mr. Barrington Parson for his contribution to the poor at a later stage, Mr. Speaker. One of the greatest highlights of our social protection program is the assistance that we have been giving to our poor children through the education grant. Every year, Mr. Speaker, a special ceremony is held to award these children who excel in their examination. Over $1 million was spent to actually give awards to 58 students who did well at the secondary and tertiary level, Mr. Speaker, And again, this is a part of the social protection program that is operated by the Poor Relief Department through the various municipal corporations. We are exposing our young people to the workings of local government while giving them incentives and using their energies and talents to help the ministry to undertake critical activities in this way. The Youth Summer Employment Program over the last 2 years have generated over 5,000 employment opportunities for young people across the country. Mr. Speaker, never in the history of local government has the local authorities provided summer employment program to the magnitude that this administration did last year, Mr. Speaker. And the only disappointment I had, Mr. Speaker, over the program in the last financial year, there are 230 parish municipal divisions in the country. And I'm disappointed that 2 councillors didn't find favor in recommending young people to work in the program. We are hoping that it do happen this year. We are going to improve the numbers to over 3,000 in this financial year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we faced challenges last year in implementing our market rehabilitation projects. We wanted to get off the ground last year. However, because of certain challenges, Mr. Speaker, we weren't able to conclude the program which we wanted to have done last year. However, I am pleased to advise this Honourable House that phase 1 of the Clarkstown market in Trelawney has been completed. We have now fully completed the work on the Linstead market, Mr. Speaker. And after many stops and starts, I am here to say that the long-awaited Port Maria market will be built this year at a cost of $55.9 million. I will be breaking ground next week for the construction of this new facility. Mr. Speaker,
we spoke to Victor Clarkson, he never come to the...
He was there. The MP was there. And he participated. Mr. Speaker, the Falmouth market in Trelawney, and Mayor Gager has sent his apology. But I want to commend him and the councillors in the Trelawney Municipal Corporation for the sterling work that they have done. And in partnership with the Port Authority of Jamaica, some $300 million have been spent to build a brand new market in Falmouth, which will be open in a couple of weeks' time, Mr. Speaker. This year, phase 2 of Clarkstown market will commence at a cost of $20 million. In Hanover, the Hopewell market will be refurbished, Mr. Speaker, while in St. Andrew, the Stony Hill and Papine market will be refurbished at a collective cost of over $30 million, Mr. Speaker. The market in Santa Cruz, Mr. Speaker, will get special attention in this year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, repairs will be done on the Charles Garden Market in St. James. Everyone knows, Mr. Speaker, the tremendous benefit that our markets provide. But there is also, Mr. Speaker, what we call partnership. Yes. And partnership goes a far way. Amen. I want to thank the new Minister of Agriculture, Commerce, and Investment, Mr. Speaker, and Fisheries, where the join-up approach for market will come, and out of that assistance, some $400 million will be dedicated working with commerce and local government to improve markets right across the length and breadth of the country. Mr. Speaker, there are over.
Members.
Mr. Speaker,
do not disturb this speaker.
Mr. Speaker,
do not disturb the
Mr.
members.
Speaker, there are over 50 markets in this country, Mr. Speaker. Over 50 markets, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the minister. You know, when he was Minister of Finance, the first time in 5 years that the SDC got a cent in the budget was when he became minister in 2016. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to water. Mr. Speaker, water is an important aspect of life. They say water is life, Mr. Speaker. Last year, Mr. Speaker, we commenced a program of installing what I call water shops in drought-stricken communities across the country. We started in Penance, in North Central Clarendon, in the constituency that you represent, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since then, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to answer you. Since then, Mr. Speaker, we have gone on, Mr. Speaker, to build another water shop, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, I have the pleasure of opening in Marley Hill, in South Manchester, the second water shop. But you know, Mr. Speaker, water shop. No. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm listening to some words coming from the former Minister of Local Government. You know, Mr. Speaker, we are not saying, Mr. Speaker, we are not saying that the water shop.
Minister, please hold a minute.
Mr. Speaker, losing the time, you know.
I am going to call names. And I'm going to ask those people who cannot follow the direction of the Speaker and the standing orders to finish the sentence for me. I would like to hear the member speak.
Mr. Speaker, when I opened the water shop in Marley Hill on Monday, the residents of the community welcome the shop, Mr. Speaker. We are not saying that this is the answer, Mr. Speaker, but at least we recognize that there's a problem and we are doing something to remedy the problem, even on a short-term basis, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are going to be building 5 more water shops within the next 2 to 3 months. 1 in central Manchester and 4 in the parish of St. Elizabeth, Mr. Speaker, to alleviate the sufferings of persons on the plain of St. Elizabeth, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, access to parochial roads. There has been a constant demand from citizens within the communities, Mr. Speaker. We have been making every attempt to upgrade, Mr. Speaker, much of the municipal roads across the country. This year, the administration has increased sixfold the level of investment in the improvement of the parochial road network. Since 2013, the administration then provided a meager $19 million in the budget for road in the Ministry of Local Government, in the capital budget, Mr. Speaker. Maga, 19 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last year, in the supplementary budget, Mr. Speaker, this government provided $150 million dedicated for parochial roads, Mr. Speaker. And because of the prudent economic practice and management of our finances, Mr. Speaker, in this year's budget, an additional $110 million have been placed in the capital budget, and out of the ministry we are going to find another $90 million, so it is going to be $200 million for parochial road this year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my last budget presentation, Mr. Speaker, I challenged the local authorities that are facing challenges with public cemeteries across the country. Mr. Speaker, public cemeteries, Mr. Speaker, in most municipalities,
Mr. Arscott,
are being
Mr. Arscott, I am asking you for the last time. Do not disturb the member while he's speaking. And if you proceed to do that or defy the speaker, I am going to take some action against you today.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Buchanan, do not disturb the speaker.
I'm losing my time.
I will put you out.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to give up this time, you know. Mr. Speaker, we are working with the municipal corporations, Mr. Speaker, to deal with the problems of public cemeteries across the country. We're going to be providing $30 million in this year's budget from the ministry to assist in the maintenance of public cemeteries across the country. I wish to advise this Honourable House of the progress on the work of the Thetford Memorial Park at Church Pen in Old Harbour. I announced this in my contribution last year as an initiative of the St. Catherine Municipal Corporation supported by the Ministry of Local Government. $70 million, Mr. Speaker, was provided to the St. Catherine Municipal Corporation, 25 by the previous administration and $50 million by this administration. In the middle of June, Mr. Speaker, that cemetery will be open to the public for burial. Mayor Norman Scott and the councillors in the St. Catherine Municipal Corporation must be commended, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend all the mayors and councillors. Mayor Delroy Williams in St. Andrew, Mayor Gager in Falmouth, Mayor Leon Thomas in Portmore, and Mayor Davis over there in Montego Bay, and all the mayors. I want to ask Bertel, you can't name everybody. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask this Honourable House. I'm going to ask this Honourable House. When I ask this Honourable House, Mr. Speaker, to remember in our prayers and in our thoughts, Mayors Derek Sangster and Michael Yu, Mayor Sangster earlier today underwent surgery in the hospital. Mayor Yu has been ordered to bed by his doctor. And the only female councillor in the St. Elizabeth Municipal Corporation, Councillor Whitney Smith, had major surgery, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask all our colleague councillors and representatives here to remember them in our prayers. Mr. Speaker, property taxes represent the area that most of the revenues to the local authority comes from, Mr. Speaker. We had a mix year involving property taxes. 7.6 billion was collected in 2016-2017, and in doing so, we exceeded the target that was set. The target was raised in the new financial year, in the last financial year. Unfortunately, the total collected was $8.5 billion, less than the $9.6 billion that was targeted, Mr. Speaker. Having analyzed the matter, we recognize that this was substantially due to the fact that the mobile units introduced in the system were still not able to collect cash. In the last financial year, the mobile units collected in excess of $240 million. We have received clear indication from property tax owners that they would rather pay cash. So, Mr. Speaker, we have done the retrofitting of the vehicle, and all the necessary checks have been done, and we are now waiting on the clearance from the Ministry of Finance and Tax Jamaica for us to proceed in using the taxmobile to collect cash. Also want to pay tribute to those who work in the property tax unit for their professionalism, and also to thank Tax Jamaica for the continuous support. One area, Mr. Speaker, of problems involving property taxes is streetlights. Mr. Speaker, the financing of streetlights is of vital importance to the country. Over the last 9 weeks, Mr. Speaker, this administration have paid close to $3 billion to the Jamaica Public Service Company on the streetlight debt, Mr. Speaker.
How much?
$3 billion. What? Only 2 days ago, $1 billion was paid to the Jamaica Public Service Company. Mr. Speaker, when we took office in 2016, the debt to the Jamaica Public Service Company was $3.7 billion, Mr. Speaker. $3.7 billion. So, Mr. Speaker, with all the monthly bills, Mr. Speaker, that is being attached, we know the importance of streetlight, Mr. Speaker. We have an obligation to meet up or to live up to these obligations. But there are concerns that we have, Mr. Speaker. The discussions with the Jamaica Public Service Company is ongoing, and I don't intend to say anything more publicly on the matter because the discussions between ourselves and JPS is continuing. But since April of this year, the repairs, Mr. Speaker, the JPS in the new Smart LD streetlight installation program, which started the 1st of June, they have installed some 35,000 streetlights in 2017. This was reported by the JPS. And on up to January this year, some 36,445 lamps were installed. Mr. Speaker, I am aware of the concerns. Mr. Speaker, that have been raised by councillors and others, Mr. Speaker. Those discussions will continue with JPS, and some questions were tabled by the member from East Kingston and Port Royal, when I am answering those questions, Mr. Speaker, I intend to give further update on the street light to this honorable House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Social Development Commission, the SDC, continue to be a shining beacon in the Ministry of Local Government. Mr. Speaker, this administration recognizes the work and the value of the SDC, and that is why we are pumping more money into the SDC to allow the SDC to perform and to deliver service. Almost every member of this honorable House can attest to the value, the goodness of the Social Development Commission under the leadership of Dr. Vernon and his deputy. I want to commend them and to congratulate them on a job of work well done, Mr. Speaker. And we are providing it, member. We are. Mr. Speaker, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management is steadily building Jamaica's capacity to prepare and to respond to natural disasters, enhancing our reputation through the Caribbean as a reliable disaster response partner. This agency provides outstanding leadership in coordinating the assistance to our Caribbean brothers and sisters during the recent passage of the hurricane earlier last year, Mr. Speaker. In Jamaica, ODPEM has been doing an important work in rationalizing the complement of shelters across the island. Yes.
Minister, the member's time for speaking has expired. You may seek permission for him to continue.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I ask that the member's time be extended for 15 minutes in order to allow him to complete his presentation.
Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ODPEM is conducting shelter management. I thank the members. Shelter management and emergency operation training in all parishes on a regional basis. This vital tool, Mr. Speaker, is a part of the preparation for the upcoming hurricane season. I want to put this honorable House and country on notice that we are to prepare ourselves for a very active hurricane season, Mr. Speaker. The government, through the various agencies, will do all that is necessary to put the country in shape. But we have to get the buy-in and the support from the wider population, Mr. Speaker, to avert some of the disasters that we have been experiencing because of heavy rain. So I want to extend to the board of directors of ODPEM and to the head of ODPEM, Major Clive Davis, and the team, how grateful we are for the service that they continue to give, working under very adverse conditions. Now, Mr. Speaker, the investment that this government has made in the Jamaica Fire Brigade is fully evident in what we have been doing. In February of this year, 106 men and women were inducted into the Jamaica Fire Brigade as firefighters. Introduced. No. Inducted. into the Jamaica Fire Brigade. Mr. Speaker, the expansion to the brigade will help, Mr. Speaker, to provide vital service, Mr. Speaker. Last month, I commissioned 2 fireboats at a cost of over 212 million Jamaican dollars to serve the people of the corporate area, Western Jamaica. This is a welcome relief, Mr. Speaker. After 11 years, no boat was made available after 11 years. And we are now, Mr. Speaker, investing some $22 million to build out the new facilities to house the men in Newport West and in Montego Bay. Want to advise, Mr. Speaker, that we are now making plans to acquire 2 more. Yes. One for Ochiros in St. Ann and one for Port Antonio in the parish of Portland. Last year, we allocated some $187 million to purchase 6 trucks for the brigade. 4 are now in service, and the other 2 are expected in the island by August of this year. We will be investing $232.6 million to obtain 4 trucks, 2 ambulances, and 2 command vehicles this year, Mr. Speaker. This is what prosperity is all about. I want to thank the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, who is currently securing an additional 6 trucks. Yes. And the Ministry of Health will be providing 2 ambulances. Mr. Speaker, these investments in the rolling stock of the agency of the Jamaica Fire Brigade has increased the fleets of trucks to 16 within less than 2 years under the Andrew Holness administration. Currently, Mr. Speaker, 7 fire stations. There are 7 fire stations that lack a working fire truck. We are working diligently, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that by the end of this calendar year, every fire station in the country have at least 1 working fire unit, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are also facilitating the rollout of the Emergency Medical Service Platform, EMS. This new sites will be launched in Ochiros, and 15 firefighters have been trained as emergency medical technicians. And in addition, 15 will be trained in June to facilitate the start of the service that will be offered in St. Ann. Once again, I want to thank the Ministry of Health for its support, Mr. Speaker. After significant delay, and I know some of you are going to say we heard it before, but finally, the design has been completed. Yes. The tender is going out shortly for the construction of the 3 fire stations in Port Maria, Montego Bay, and Yallas, Mr. Speaker. We are also going to be carrying out repairs on the Black River, Frankfield, Maypen, Buff Bay, and the Freeport Fire Station in this financial year, Mr. Speaker. Prosperity on the move. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that the most improved agency in this country and in the Ministry of Local Government is the National Solid Waste Management Authority. Mr. Speaker, the agency was making the news for all the wrong reasons. Before the change of administration, corporate governance and in particular complying with the reporting mechanism, never existed at all at the National Solid Waste Management Authority. The new board, the new board of the agency took on the challenge aggressively. And Mr. Speaker, I am a proud minister today because I am going to be holding up in this honorable house for the first time the audited reports on all the entities of the National Solid Waste Management Authority. Mr. Speaker, this is coming from 2007. The agency is up to date as I speak with all its audited financial reports, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are proud because this is the first time, Mr. Speaker, the first time we are correcting also, Mr. Speaker, a long-standing wrong that has been a feature of employment in the National Solid Waste Management Authority. The ordinary man and woman who sweeps the street, and especially those who are in the age group of 60 and over, they got employment with no job security. None whatsoever, Mr. Speaker. The board of the National Solid Waste Management Authority, led by Dennis, and when the CEO approached me, they put the case to say that there are over 100 and odd such workers out there who have either retired or they have died and their family are left without a cent because no arrangement was made to give them their ex gratia payment. Finally, Mr. Speaker, over 120 odd such workers have benefited from $45.7 million, and nobody that has worked with the National Solid Waste Management Authority can say that they have not been fully compensated, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of the complaints that you get from the workers is the low salaries that they get. Mr. Speaker, again, because of effective leadership and because of concerns for those who fall in a certain category, this caring administration of the Jamaica Labour Party has increased by 25% the salaries as of the 1st of May to workers at the National Solid Waste Management Office. I want to commend the board, led by Dennis, for his outstanding performance. And I also want to commend the Executive Director, Mr. Audley Gordon, for his hard work. Mr. Speaker, garbage collection is a challenge, major challenge. But I want to tell you, I was in St. Ann last week at the Municipal Corporation, and the councillor, the minority leader for the St. Ann Municipal Corporation, Councillor Winston Brown, from the Boroughbridge Division in St. Ann, got up and showered praises on the work of the National Solid Management Rate. Shower praises, commendation on solid waste. He spoke about the improvement in the quality of service. Right. Okay? Shower. He showered praises. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to touch the comments made by the former minister about Riverton City Fire. I'm not going to, because the facts are there. All I'm going to ask him to do is to produce the shredder that he claimed that was provided when he was there, when the minister. When him can tell me where it is, and I can go and touch it, the tire shredder, then I will respond to him. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the National Solid Waste Management Authority. There's another issue, Mr. Speaker, that is of concern. There is no transfer station to take the garbage from one parish to another. For example, please, just listen, please. For instance, if the garbage is collected in Westmoreland, they have to drive all the way from Westmoreland to retreat in St. James to dispose of the garbage. So it means, Mr. Speaker, that they can probably only make one trip for the day. And that is a waste. Mr. Speaker, this administration is not just talking about fixing the problem. We have provided $90 million in this year's budget to erect a transfer station in the parish of Trelawney to deal with that section of the island, Mr. Speaker. And we're going to be moving members from Westmoreland to deal with the issue in Westmoreland. Mr. Speaker, ask your colleague. Mr. Speaker, significant improvements have been made, Mr. Speaker, in the last financial year, we provided $561.8 million to acquire 28 new compactors to improve garbage collection. $120 million was allocated to repair 25 existing trucks. For 2018-2019 financial year, the agency provided 12 new units, Mr. Speaker, at a cost of over $300 million. The agency will also be receiving from GSF, through the World Bank Integrated Community Development Project, an additional 3 trucks, Mr. Speaker. This will bring the total of new trucks within the financial year to an unprecedented investment of over 43, the first in the history of the National Solid Waste Management Authority. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, in the midst of our challenges, local government is on the upward path. This momentum of improvement is clearly a function of the work of the men and women in local government. It is undeniable the outcome and the sustained investment that this administration has made since taking office just over 2 years ago. The figures speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. I compare the allocation from the capital expenditure on the National Solid Waste Management Authority, the Jamaica Fire Brigade, and the development of the local authorities, infirmary infrastructure over the life of this administration with the allocation made over the term of the last administration. This is it. Between the financial year 2012-2013 and up to 2015-2016, the last administration spent $66.1 million on upgrading infirmaries and drop-in centers. From 2016, inclusive of this budget, this administration is investing $307.4 million in infirmaries and drop-in centers. That is what prosperity is all about. The last administration spent $332.3 million over its full term on the procurement and repairs of garbage trucks and disposal sites infrastructure. This administration has invested $948 million in 2 years since we took office. This is what prosperity is all about. Mr. Speaker, the last administration spent $605 million on fire trucks and related vehicles such as ambulances over its full term. In 2 years, this government have invested $1,077 million. This is what prosperity is all about. The last administration claimed to love and cherish local government, Mr. Speaker. They spent an overall total of $1,023 million on all these 3 major areas over the 4 years of the last term. After 2 years in office, now entering our 3rd budget cycle, this government has invested and committed some $2.68 billion in critical areas. This is what prosperity is all about. And finally, Mr. Speaker, when you take in last year's investment of $700 million into the social assistance program, when you factor all of that in, this administration has invested over $3 billion in people, structure, and system of local government. This is what local government is all about. This is what prosperity begets, prosperity, and there is much more to come. We are keeping our commitment to the people of Jamaica through performance that is fueled by sound capital investment. Mr. Speaker, it comes right back to what we was taught in this very house by my mentor and leader, the most Honorable Edward Siaga. It takes cash to care. The people of this country can be assured that this administration will continue the investment in the transformation of local government. We will continue to improve. We will continue to innovate. We will never stop trying. Nelson Mandela said, when a man has done what he considered to be his duty to his people and his country, he can rest. Well, I have no intention of resting. Mr. Speaker, this government has no intention to rest. With every difficulty and with every small and large achievement, we are challenged and motivated to do even more to bring lasting prosperity under Andrew Holness to every single Jamaican through local government. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Members. Mr. Semuda.
It is unquestionably a job well done. Congratulations, Minister. But, Mr. Speaker, I wish to request for a suspension of the standing orders to permit me to take a matter at questions and answers to questions. A recommitter.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Mr. Minister.
Speaker, I have been asked by the Minister of Health to table in his absence. He has had to run out. Where is he? Oh, he's there. Yeah. Well, I can still take it on his behalf. He wishes to table on the questions to the answers to the questions that were asked of him. So You will be getting right away.
Minister, before you proceed, let me ask members to turn to the standing orders and follow the standing orders. Both the minister that is answering the questions and the member that asks the questions and anybody else, please follow the standing orders.
Mr. Speaker, there is to be no questions on the list of questions that have been tabled in. It will be taken at the next session or at the time that the minister... Well, you'll have to wait. You will wait at the end of the presentation by the minister.
So you don't need to recommit?
No, we had passed question time. We had passed question time. Yeah. So, Mr. Speaker, we can now move on to the presentation by the Minister without portfolio.
No.
No, you have to recommit.
Mr. Curtis. Is still in session. Minister Spencer, you may make your presentation at this time.
National security. No, national security. National security. National security. Do not be disrespectful. Rude and out of order.
Even the prison. It's all right. Mr. Speaker, my esteemed colleagues on either side, I wish to acknowledge the confidence reposed in me by the Most Honorable Prime Minister and also Dr. Horace Chang to share on the national security portfolio to the country. I wish to pay special thanks to the former Minister of National Security, the Honorable Robert Montague, and also Senator Colonel Charles.
Mr. Spencer, we are going to start the clock. We're going to start the clock for you because you weren't ready. So we're going to start you. So please proceed. Go ahead. Set the clock.
I wish to pay special thanks to the Honorable Robert Montague and Senator Colonel Charles, both of whom did a tremendous job, and I wish them success in their new endeavors. None of my seaters?
No, you're just speaking.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to ask permission to speak from a chair.
You may proceed, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you. I wish also to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the manner in which you have been conducting the affairs of this Parliament. To my family, I wish to thank them for accepting me, coming home in the evenings, sometime nights, after a hard day's work, and to greet me with open arms. I thank them. I wish also to pay special thanks to the people at the Ministry of National Security, on whom I come to rely for tremendous support. I wish also to pay very special thanks to the people of the noble constituency of Southeast Clarendon. Those people find it necessary and with worth for returning me to this Parliament time and time again. And I wish to thank them most heartily. And I wish to tell you that they have advised me that there's no stopping. I'll be coming back again. I wish to highlight the Department of Correctional Services and the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force, for which I have direct responsibility. The DCS is led by Commissioner Ina Hunter and is staffed by over 2,000 committed men and women who manage the day-to-day custodial and probation services of the DCS. At the JCCF, Commander Johnson and his team continue to support opportunities for positive youth development in cadets across the island. I wish to offer my unreserved appreciation for their important work under very demanding circumstances and difficult conditions as part of the comprehensive efforts of the Ministry of National Security to keep our country safe. Mr. Speaker, every day we at the Ministry of National Security are challenged with the task of making Jamaica a safe and prosperous nation. It is in this that we find common purpose. Across our Caribbean region, security is primary concern. In Jamaica, violent crime is estimated to cost our economy approximately 4% of GDP. Crime and violence in our society continue to be pervasive across communities. But this did not start overnight. As my colleague minister would say, who laid the foundation through the 5-pillar crime reduction strategy, has said repeatedly, the seeds were planted long ago. Poor parenting, early exposure to violence in the home and community, low educational outcomes are known factors that contribute to the perpetual issue of crime and violence in the country. Numerous studies across different countries and cultures have arrived at a common finding, which is now universally accepted. A small minority of youth, defined as persons aged 15 to 24 years, are responsible for a large percentage of all violent crimes. Many of these juvenile offenders would have been exposed to violence and reproduce violent behavior from an early age, usually at home or in the community. In Jamaica, youth are both the main perpetrators and victims of violence. Our priority must be to engage, empower, and educate our youth. We must be prepared to tell them from early that wrong choices have tough consequences. And above all, we must find more effective ways to present them with better life options. In this regard, the Ministry of National Security wants to remind this Honorable House and the nation of the strategy that is guiding our efforts toward crime reduction. This strategy has 5 elements that provide a basis for short and long-term programs that enable the objectives of the National Development Plan, Vision 2030. Swift and sure justice, which focuses on improved court management and reduction in delays in the disposal of cases. Situational prevention aims to reduce opportunities for crimes to be committed through safe design of environments. Effective policing involves strengthening the rule of law and enhancing police legitimacy with the general public. Crime prevention through social development aims to reduce the risk of future crime, and rehabilitation and redemption emphasizes rehabilitation and reintegration programs for offenders under the care and supervision of the DCS. The Minister will speak in greater detail on this strategy when he makes his presentation. We must continue to reduce our inmates and wards from a path of crime in this regard. We are currently drafting a national rehabilitation strategy designed to cater to their individual needs. It is noteworthy that all the children are engaged in purposeful activities, such as education, skills training, among others. Equally worthy of note is that we are moving towards ensuring that all adults are meaningfully engaged in rehabilitation and reintegration programs throughout their term. Mindful of this, the government, as a matter of policy, is putting renewed focus on dissuading people from engaging in criminal activity through the implementation of crime prevention through social development and rehabilitation and redemption. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to interrupting the transmission of crime and violence at the root. We will engage our young people and use every opportunity to reach youth who are at the greatest risk of offending and re-offending. In this regard, both the Department of Correctional Services, the DCS, and the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force, as well as other youth development organizations, have a role to play. Mr. Speaker, for too long, our crime management strategies have largely focused on the older youth and young adults. We need to have a proactive approach that will complement the existing strategies in order to see sustainable reduction in crime and violence. The JCCF is one avenue through which the government will proactively address crime. As Minister of State, I intend to promote social development through youth engagement, facilitated by GCCF and similar organizations that have the ability to reach the target group and help with positive diversion activities. The ministry will support initiatives that help to counter factors and negatively shape the way our children think and deal with situations, especially conflict. Mr. Speaker, since 1943, the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force, a voluntary paramilitary youthful organization under the remit of the Ministry of National Security, has served to instill discipline, develop leadership abilities, and promote good citizenship among their members. The program challenges youth and develops character qualities valuable to the civilian and soldier alike. Currently, there are 2,741 cadets in the approximately 81 secondary high schools, within the island, and 285 volunteer adults who are trained to lead and guide the children once enrolled in the program. Mr. Speaker, the JCCF is one excellent organization for imparting values and attitudes to our young people. It is noteworthy that several cadets are currently appointed head boys, head girls, and student council officials because of their high academic performance, level of discipline, and leadership qualities. The cadets are engaged in several community outreach projects and provide valuable assistance such as first aid support and the annual Boys and Girls Championship and various events. However, its potential for youth engagement has not been fully maximized. Therefore, we have steadfastly been reaching out to schools, especially in crime hotspots, to increase the number of cadet units across the island. This move is essential to expanding our youth, especially those at risk of going down the path of crime and violence. Since the last quarter of 2017, through the JCCF expansion project, 2017 to 2022, 10 schools came on board and joined the Jamaica Combined Cadet Force. Discussions are being held with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information for a partnership with the JCCF to increase the number of secondary schools with cadet units, an additional 50 this year. We are targeting approximately 5,000 youth over the 5-year period and intend to broaden the geographical scope. Mr. Speaker, this project will play a monumental role in maximizing the positive impact of the JCS on the lives of our youth in the country. Additionally, the Cadet Corps can also serve as a pool of resources for recruitment to the Jamaica Defense Force, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, and the Jamaica Fire Brigade. The ministry recognizes that the JCCF engages in work that is critical to the crime prevention through social development pillar of the National Crime and Reduction Strategy. Cadets are prime conduits for dissemination of crime prevention messages and conflict. We have designed a program to leverage the principles of discipline, leadership, and community service into the wider national youth population as part of our crime prevention engagement strategy. Since November 2016, the Cadet Ambassador Program, dubbed TCAP, transforms cadet into non-violent conflict resolution ambassadors. This is geared towards encouraging youth participation in the preventative measures to combat crime and violence. To date, 16 cadets have successfully completed the program. Cadets will share the principles of conflict with their peers. Therefore, these JCCF cadets will become channels for disseminating messages and engender the kind of behavior we want in our society. This strategy will boost cadet confidence and promote skill development in areas such as public speaking, while simultaneously enhancing school safety. Mr. Speaker, reducing reoffending is an equally important focus of the crime prevention strategy, which is the mandate of the JCF. The DCS has the tremendous responsibility for the operations and management of the correctional services in Jamaica. This includes the administration of 7 adult correctional centers and 4 juvenile centers. As at May 4th, 2018, the inmate population in these facilities stood at 3,620 adults, 118 females, and 3,502 males, and 230 children, 53 girls and 177 boys. Additionally, through the 16 probation offices across Jamaica, the DCS supervises 2,958 persons serving non-custodial orders island-wide. As at May 4th, some 506 parolees were being supervised by probation officers. At the heart of the government's policy to the management of the correctional services is purposeful rehabilitation for successful reintegration, which guides how we treat with inmates in our custody and those serving non-custodial sentences. In the first few weeks of taking up office, I did my own assessment of the DCS. I toured correctional facilities and met with DCF staff, which allowed me to observe the work of correctional officers and other staff in the institutions. These interactions have been very instructive. Not only have I seen firsthand what life is like behind bars, but I also gained insight into the challenges. Both of the convicted offenders as well as the staff who manage the system. Mr. Speaker, the correctional services in Jamaica are in urgent need of reform and modernization. There is a need for better living spaces for inmates and more functional working conditions for the correctional officers. And we grapple with the still unacceptable numbers of youth and young men in the system. I encountered children holding on to their dreams and aspirations. So many of them said to me, "Sir, I still want to be a soldier. I want to be a pilot. I want to be a doctor." These children in our correctional facilities are hoping for redemption and reintegration in society. In our facilities, we have wards who have passed 6 and 7 subjects at CSEC, and former wards who are pursuing tertiary education. This speaks to their vast potential. I am happy to state that my colleague Minister, Senator the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., had taken a significant step to providing these children with the opportunity to realize their dreams through the We Transform program. The We Transform Youth Empowerment and Reintegration Program is the Ministry of National Security flagship youth transformation program geared towards providing the children 12 to 17 years within the care and supervision of the Department of Correctional Services with the requisite skill sets, character, and support to become productive model citizens. The program is one of the ministry's strategic evidence-based approaches to reducing youth offending and, by extension, the high levels of crime and violence. The program has gained the support of several organizations, including the Chase Fund, Organization of American States, United States Agency for International Aid, Jamaica Public Service Foundation, Jamaica Union Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, Operation Save Jamaica, Hawkeye Jamaica, Tasty Limited, as well as other ministries, departments, and agencies. It is also noteworthy that several public figures, including reggae artist Jeffrey Agent Sasko Campbell, gospel artist Jermaine Edwards, Miss Jamaica Universe 2014 Casey Fennell Shirley, Miss Jamaica World, Mr. Sinclair and singer and media personality Naomi Campbell have all partnered with the We Transform program as ambassadors and mentors for children within the correctional services. The successes of the program thus far compel me to build on this and push for reforms that will give our children a second chance at the life through effective resocialization and rehabilitation programs. Mr. Speaker, the time has come long for us to carefully consider our attitudes and behavior towards those who have been incarcerated. The time has come for us all, as Jamaicans, to listen to our better angels when we reflect on the state of our fellow citizens in correctional institutions, to choose to be less judgmental by becoming more redemptive in spirit, see the potential of those behind bars, and be bold enough to allow them to seize the opportunity of a second chance to become productive members of society. The Department of Correctional Facilities needs the support of our society to maximize the success its rehabilitation and reintegration program. Mr. Speaker, I am not naive to the challenges we face in modernizing our correctional service and delivering a comprehensive rehabilitation strategy. The administration inherited a system with several shortcomings, as pointed out in a report by UWI Professor Anthony Clayton, Commissioner Hunter, and others. 1. Limited use of technology and need for capacity building of the staff. Grossly inadequate facilities, some of which are deteriorating. Overcrowded, unsanitary, and no longer fit for purpose buildings. Corruption and low staff morale. Inmates with mental illnesses and learning challenges. Systematic public stigmatization of inmates and even of workers in the system. No magic wand will solve these problems overnight, but I'm equally resolved that we must overcome. We cannot continue to operate as normal while challenges exist. It is not beyond us to create solutions that are meaningful and that add value to the lives of those within state care, as well as our correctional officers. The government is putting its finger on the root of the problem. We will deliver a comprehensive rehabilitation strategy in our correctional facilities. Mr. Speaker, a key part of this effort will be the upgrade of the Carl Rattray Staff College in St. Ann for our correctional officers. Our correctional officers do this country a service from their hearts, and it is not easy. This is why we are moving to provide them with the best training and the resources to carry out their functions effectively. Commissioner Hunter and I will be touring the facility and meeting with the staff so as to upgrade the facility and to transform the facility into one that is best for training. One of our primary mandates in keeping the offenders secure, equally important, is our duty to support crime prevention by calibrating the system to transform more lives, to bring down the rate of reoffending, and to make Jamaica a safer and more prosperous nation. The respected American jurist and scholar Roger Warner had this to say about prison rehabilitation, and I quote, "State sentencing policies that expect to control crime solely by punishing the offender's past misbehavior without any meaningful effort to positively influence the offender's future behavior are short-sighted, ignore overwhelming evidence to the contrary, and needlessly endanger public safety. This is why we are focusing our attention on rehabilitation and redemption, because we want to ensure that once offenders pass through the gates of our facilities, they will leave there much better persons, being able to contribute meaningfully to society and safeguard youths against coming in. Colleagues, the focus on punishing the offender does not work. Keeping them solely confined in the worst of places still sees them committing another crime and re-entering the criminal justice system at a rate of almost 50% within a few years after being released. Mr. Speaker, if we are honest with ourselves, we will realize that even from an enlightened self-interest perspective, since most of our inmates will be released within 3 years, it certainly makes no sense to dehumanize these young people. For that period of time before releasing them back into the society, we have to show those in conflict with the law that there are alternatives to life of criminality. The foremost aim is therefore to reform and rehabilitate offenders and so reduce the risk of reoffending. Fortunately, we do know what works. Almost all studies agree that ex-offenders are 5 to 26% less likely to commit another crime once they were empowered whilst incarcerated through getting therapy, benefiting for treatment for drug and other addictions, learning literacy skills, gaining life skills, and living with a vocation that will enable them to earn a decent living upon release, but more importantly, to dissuade them from returning. Mr. Speaker, our rehabilitation strategy is not based on just the kindness of our hearts, but on empirical evidence, which explains that we can lower crime and create a safer Jamaica by empowering those incarcerated and putting them in a position to be less susceptible to the life of crime. This has already begun. I believe that education is a bridge that links poverty to prosperity. Education is a key part of the rehabilitation process and empowering inmates. It is one of the main tools we are using to reduce reoffending and enable inmates to make a valuable contribution to society. To ensure that more inmates leave being functionally literate, we have partnered with the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning, who have provided us with 6 additional teachers and trained our core teaching staff in how to deliver the high school diploma equivalency. Mr. Speaker, over 200 inmates are improving their literacy through this initiative.
Good move.
Participants who are unable to read at the intermediary level will benefit from literacy training, while those already at that level will be exposed to various CSEC courses. The courses include English A, mathematics, human and social biology, social studies, principles of business. Just recently, I handed over 4 laptop computers that will aid inmates at the Fort Augusta in preparation for their CSEC electronic document preparation management. Crucial to the project as well is the preparation of inmates for long-term employment. Each inmate will benefit from learning and receiving certification in a vocation. These skills areas include making beaded jewelry, information technology, screen printing, and music, all of which will be bolstered by entrepreneurship training. We have also partnered with the Heart Trust NTA to ensure that our inmates are trained and certified in vocational areas. Mr. Speaker, over 300 inmates learn various skills, including how to make jewelry, furniture, as well as how to farm in the last financial year. I must pay tribute here once again to Senator Colonel Charles, who in his wisdom invited NGO Stand Up for Jamaica as partners to the DCS. This partnership led to a successful grant submission which saw DCS receiving over 40 million Jamaican in grant funding from the EU to commence the most comprehensive rehabilitation project in DCS history. Over the next 3 years, 900 inmates are expected to benefit from year-long engagement involving life skills workshops, focusing on self-development, conflict management, family life management, and career development. Wards in the South Camp Juvenile Correctional Center will benefit from an outside gynecologist. Under this project, inmates will be seen as partners and will lead on organizing and implementing various activities. One of the programs we are really proud of is rehabilitation through music. Yes. That was introduced by retired Superintendent Gladstone Wright in 2005. This program was responsible for Sikatur Alcock, also known as Jacure. His song, True Reflection, turned out to be one of the most successful, impactful songs to come out of Jamaica. And it was done whilst he was in prison. This is why we are not only training our inmates in life skills, but we are making assessment of the talents they possess and zoom in on that so that we can reproduce more artists like Jacure. This program is part of the DCS multifaceted approach to rehabilitation, which has benefited greatly from the input of songwriter Mr. Dwayne Stevenson, voice coach Mr. Ewan Simpson, the former Commissioner of Correctional Services, Major Richard Rees, and technical assistance for the Bogdanovich, CEO of Down Sound Records. The program was reintroduced with Mr. Wright as project director. To date, the program has made significant strides as several inmates have been identified, vetted, and auditioned for the program. The Rehabilitation Through Music program is currently in the process of developing 2 albums of 16 songs each, one by a talented and accomplished artist, and the other which is a compilation of songs from several current and former inmates. Some songs have been completed and others are at different stages of production. Last year, a song from the program entitled Jamaica 55 was selected to be on the Jamaica 55 commemorative album by the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports to the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission. This year, the song entitled Hand on Your Heart entered the JCDC Festival Song Competition and was selected to be among the top 10 finalists. I must express thanks to the producers and musicians who have helped this program by volunteering their service for working at reduced cost. The end result, Mr. Speaker, is that we are looking at a group of inmates who will be leaving much more empowered and less likely to return to a life of crime. Mr. Speaker, we have listened to the public. We know they want inmates to be put to work. Inmates want to work as well. Currently, all correctional institutions, with the exception of Horizon Adult Remand Center, are engaged in agricultural production. For the period December 2017 to March 2018, the DCS saved approximately $1 million as inmates and wards produce a portion of the food they consume. We are moving hastily to ensure that all inmates be engaged in agriculture, but more importantly, that they feed themselves. Yes. All of them. Yes. That no longer will we use money from the budget to assist that program. Yes. And we are hoping that when it is done, we will have enough left over so we can sell to the public to save millions of dollars. We will also report, Mr. Speaker, that we will require no money from the taxpayers to feed inmates, as the inmates will not only learn farming, but do so in practice, as they will continue to cultivate the land in the institutions in order to feed themselves and over time produce enough excess to sell to the public. This is another area through which the government is providing a platform for successful reintegration. Through this agricultural plan, more inmates will be involved in the agricultural production of short-term crops, poultry, rearing, aquaculture, and rabbit rearing. This program will provide the best option for rehabilitation based on resources, cost, and health of inmates, marketplace demand, and work ethic associated with farming. Mr. Speaker, if we truly mean what we say, when we declare as a guiding principle rehabilitation for reintegration, then we must put the measures in place in our correctional facilities to provide the life skills for the inmates leaving the system and mitigate against the risk of them regressing into a life of crime and violence. So, in practical terms, when we talk about a comprehensive rehabilitation program, we mean setting realistic goals for inmates and wards leaving our system to be functionally literate, be capable of making good decisions with some ability to communicate their emotions, and not revert to violence and antisocial behavior. Have improved self-esteem and capacity to de-escalate conflicts. Have improved parenting skills to return to their families and know how to identify and pursue a career. Have social values and a sense of citizenship. These are outcomes that we are setting for the DCS and for which they will be held accountable. Mr. Speaker, allow me to turn to another risk factor in our correctional system, the matter of mental health issues among the inmate population. Currently, there are 282 mentally ill inmates who represent 7% of the inmate population, and nearly half of whom, 119 to be exact, are unfit to plead. The Ministry of National Security has mandated the National Security Council in 2017, was drafted a proposal on how to treat, care, and house the unfit to plead population. We are now at the consultation stage, and we are aiming to complete a strategy during this financial year. On the troublesome issue of sex offenders, there are 168 registered sex offenders in our correctional facilities. We are still working assiduously to provide sufficient intervention programs for sex offenders and inmates in need of psychiatric care. The ministry is arranging individual and group therapy sessions to address criminology, needs, and appropriate treatment for these offenders. The web-based sex offender registry is also being updated in order to effectively track sex offenders post-release. In addition, inmates who struggle with substance abuse now receive assistance. Recently, the DCS collaborated with National Council on Drug Abuse to develop the substance treatment and referral tool. The tool is administered by probation aftercare officers to people serving non-custodial sentences. Since the launch of the program in October 2016, 105 persons have been registered as at March 2018 and referred to the NCDC for treatment. Delivering a comprehensive rehabilitation strategy will require that we equip the DCS with additional training capacity, building, and support. The electronic case management system, closed-circuit television system, and amendment to the legislative framework represent game changers in our move towards a modern correctional facility. We will implement an electronic case management system to replace the current paper-based system to support effective offender management with the assistance of our international partner. The Organization of American States, an electronic case management system, was identified in Brazil, which can be replicated in Jamaica with minor adjustments. It is expected that the implementation of this system will improve monitoring and treatment of offenders. This too is slated for completion in financial year 2018-19. We also intend to install high-technology closed-circuit television system throughout all correctional and remand centers. This will significantly improve the DCS monitoring capability and act as a deterrent to people wanting to bring prohibited items into our facilities. There will be a progressive legislative agenda to support efficient and effective management by the leadership within the DCS. A review of the Parole Act is being undertaken to revise the forms to capture more relevant information, to better assist the parole board in making informed decisions, to align the Act with current best practices, and particularly to enable juvenile offenders to be eligible to apply for parole. In addition to a general review of the Corrections Act to update revised aspects outdated, we are seeking to make amendments to the following areas: to increase the fines for trafficking in contraband and to set a clearer definition for contraband and prohibited items, to support the use of electronic tagging of inmates, to clarify the role of the probation officer in the supervision of children who need monitoring while serving non-custodial sentences. Further, to an assessment of other jurisdictions, we are exploring the separation of the justice system for adults and children. Consultations have commenced, and legislative amendments will be examined likewise. This, in our view, will be a game changer in how we deal with juvenile offenders and define our success at rehabilitation of these offenders into productive members of society. Aged and deteriorating infrastructure at the Tower Street and St. Catherine Correctional Facilities pose a threat to the safety and security of inmates and staff at these facilities. Inmate population management. This administration is keen on addressing the issue of overcrowding in our correctional facilities.
Members' time for speaking has expired.
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the member's time be extended for 15 minutes, sufficient to enable him to complete his presentation.
Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Minister Spencer.
Yes. To alleviate the overcrowding problem at the maximum security facilities, a 304-cell block was constructed at Tamarind Farm Adult Correctional System. The aim is to reduce the overcrowding at the two main maximum security facilities by way of classification and transfer to the new block at Tamarind Farm facility. Inmates are being reclassified and transferred from overcrowded maximum security centers Tower Street and St. Catherine Correctional Center to underpopulated medium and low security centers. Protocols have been developed and targets set in order to address inconsistencies in the reclassification efforts of the past. This has already borne fruit. There has been an increase of 443 inmates reclassified and transferred in 2016 to 563 inmates in 2017. This represents a 27% increase in the number of inmates reclassified and transferred. Those who study penal system have identified a host of alternatives that are proving to be more effective. One option being pursued is electronic tagging and monitoring of low-risk inmates. The use of electronic monitoring, deployment via global position system for the purpose of electronically monitoring persons on bail or those convicted of minor offenses via GPS is a tool widely used worldwide. Last year, the DCS launched the pilot phase of the electronic monitoring program. Potential suppliers were given an opportunity to demonstrate the suitability of the electronic tag through appropriate testing and to ensure operational effectiveness. 55 inmates participated in the program, which proved to be a success and will be used to monitor low-risk inmates. This alternative is cheaper than imprisonment, prevents overcrowding, and strengthens families and communities. Mr. Speaker, with the assistance of local and overseas partners, this administration will promote a safer Jamaica through crime prevention, through social development and rehabilitation and redemption pillars of the 5-pillar crime reduction strategy. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information educational programs in juvenile centers. A proposal is being developed to have the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information assume responsibility for the education of children in the custody of these states. This in keeping with the Sinclair-McCall report, the report of the task force on the new regime for juveniles in remand and correctional facilities in Jamaica, and with international best practice.